Have you ever wondered why the men who say they love you the most often pull away the hardest? Why the more open your heart becomes, the more carefully he guards his? Why the man who once adored you with fire in his eyes suddenly looks at you as if you're a mirror he can't bear to face? Behind that silence, that distance, that shift in his energy, lives a fear he barely understands, one not shaped by logic, but by the shadow. A fear older than his ego, deeper than his desire, the fear of being seen by love and undone by it. To love a woman fully is to surrender to something wild, something unknowable, something that asks a man to release control in ways he has never been taught to survive. He can conquer, he can protect, he can even desire, but to be seen, truly seen, by the woman he loves, that shakes the foundation of the identity he has built. For centuries, men have been taught to master their world, to dominate, to fix, to stay 2 steps ahead. But love, real love is chaos. Real love is raw. Real love sees through the image. It pierces the armor and whispers, This is not who you are, and that terrifies him, because in the gaze of a conscious woman, a man is not only admired, he is revealed. She sees not only his strength, but the boy he buried, not only his ambition, but the ache beneath it, not only his stoicism, but the fragility he silences. And this seeing activates an ancient wound within him, the fear of exposure without control. He was never taught how to be held. He was taught to hold others, to carry, to perform, to be useful. He was praised for what he could do, not who he was. And now, this woman dares to want him for his soul. A thing he spent his entire life trying to keep safe from sight. The man who pulls away from the woman he loves isn't fleeing her. He's fleeing the parts of himself she awakens. The rage he never voiced. The grief he buried in his chest. The desire to be soft without losing his manhood. These are the truths she draws to the surface just by being present. And the closer she gets, the louder those truths become. Carl Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And so he retreats, not out of indifference, but out of instinct. The same instinct that kept him safe when vulnerability meant ridicule. The same instinct that told him long ago that emotion is weakness, that sensitivity is shame. And you stand there wondering, why did he stop trying? Why does he feel further away, even when he's holding me? It's because love has begun to dissolve the mask. You've reached a depth where his ego no longer knows how to lead. You are not demanding his protection, you are offering your presence. And that offering, though gentle, strikes him with more force than any battlefield. Because now he must ask himself a question that splits him wide open. If I am not my role, if I am not my image, who am I? You are not just his lover. You are the mirror of his buried self. The Anima come to life, the goddess who doesn't beg, but reflects. And in your reflection, he sees the life he could have lived if he had not been taught to fear his own heart. But not every man is ready to hold what you reflect. Because your love does not comfort the mask, calls it into question. Your tenderness does not stroke the ego, it reaches for the soul. You offer not validation, but truth. And the truth is this: he has never known how to receive love without trying to earn it. He does not know what to do with a woman who sees his pain and does not try to fix it, who meets his silence not with fear, but with knowing. And so, his deepest fear begins to take shape. What if she loves me, and I am not enough when I'm not performing? He will not say it. He may not even know it, but he feels it. That terror that she will one day see what he sees when he's alone. The flaws, the fears, the fragility. And she will turn away, not because she's cruel, but because she's real. And real love, to the unhealed man, always feels like a threat. You are not the threat. His shame is. And unless he confronts it, unless he turns inward and begins the sacred, brutal work of shadow integration, he will sabotage the very thing he longs for most. To be loved, not for what he offers, but for who he is. In the stillness of your presence, his inner walls begin to tremble. Not because you demand anything from him, but because you don't. You are not asking for performance. You are not begging for reassurance. You are not chasing approval. You are simply being rooted, radiant, aware. And that is the very thing he fears most. You see, when a man meets a woman who needs nothing from him but his truth, he begins to face a crisis of identity. Because all his life, he has equated love with utility. He has been taught, sometimes overtly, sometimes through silence, that his value lies in what he provides. Money, protection, stability, answers. His power lies in doing. His worth in control. But the woman who loves from her core, who has done the work of self-reclamation, is not looking for a savior. She is not interested in being completed. She is not seduced by surface. She seeks depth, presence, inner congruence, and suddenly he realizes his status, his charisma, his achievements. None of these will earn her, because the love she offers cannot be bought, can only be met, and to meet her there in that place of raw presence, he must offer not what he has but what he is, and that, for the uninitiated man, feels like death. The death of the illusion, the collapse of the persona, the terrifying shedding of all the roles he has used to navigate the world. And in that death, he must face his own inner chaos, the places where the boy still cries, still aches, still wonders if he is lovable without effort. This is the journey Jung mapped in his work on individuation. The process of integrating the fragmented self, of uniting the conscious ego with the unconscious shadow. It is not comfortable. It is not clean. It is a spiritual unmaking, the soul's deep dive into the waters of wholeness. And most men only begin that descent when the pain of their inner split becomes unbearable. But for many, the moment arrives in relationship. Not with a woman who demands change, but with one who sees through the facade. A woman whose love is not a transaction, but a transmission. She does not ask him to become someone else. She invites him to remember who he's always been beneath the noise. Still, that invitation terrifies him, because he does not yet trust what will remain once the armor is removed. And so he resists, not with cruelty, but with confusion. He withdraws emotionally. He finds fault in her clarity. He may even provoke conflict to create distance, because part of him believes it is safer to be pushed away than to be truly seen. You must understand, when he begins to fear the woman he loves, it is not because she is too much. It is because she is too honest. She mirrors his fragmentation. She doesn't allow him to hide in charm or logic. She asks questions with her eyes that his ego cannot answer. And slowly, a question begins to echo in his soul. Can I love her without losing myself? But here's the paradox. The very self he fears losing is not his truth. It is his mask, the image he has polished, the persona he has crafted. What he is being asked to surrender is not his essence, but his performance. And if he dares to surrender, if he steps into the fire of her truth with his own, something profound happens. He doesn't weaken, he expands. Because the love of a conscious woman doesn't diminish the man, it dismantles the false man. And from that dismantling, a deeper masculinity is born. One not rooted in dominance or detachment, but in emotional integrity, sacred strength, devotional presence. But until he sees that, until he chooses the path of self-confrontation over self-preservation, he will oscillate between yearning and fear. He will reach for the woman he loves, then retreat from the weight of being known. And that is not your burden to carry. You are not here to coax him into healing. You are not a muse for his transformation. You are not a placeholder for his potential. You are the embodiment of your own wholeness. And the moment you begin to diminish yourself to soothe his fear, you abandon the very truth that called him to you. So let him pull away if he must. Let him run from the mirror if he's not ready to face what it reflects. Because when you remain rooted, when you stay loyal to your own soul even in the absence of his certainty, you rise beyond the reach of codependency. You become the woman whose love is not a drug, but a doorway, and only those who are willing to walk through it will ever truly meet you. There is a silence that descends after he leaves, not the silence of absence, but of reckoning. You can feel it press against your chest in the midnight hours, not as grief, but as clarity. The truth settling in your bones. He didn't walk away because you were too much. He walked away because you were too real, too honest, too steady, too unafraid to love without losing yourself. And that kind of love, it terrifies the man who still clings to illusion. The fear he carries is not about you. It's about what you activate in him. You are the doorway to his depths, and to walk through you would require abandoning the small self he has used to navigate the world. The performative self, the protector, the provider. He spent so long maintaining control, proving his worth, seeking external approval, that now, confronted with a love that asks for none of it, he collapses beneath the weight of his own falsehood. You see, the awakened feminine does not worship the ego. She invites the soul. And the soul, when unpracticed, flinches. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But most men are still trapped in who they were told to be. Told not to cry, told to be strong, told to suppress softness and never reveal need. And now, here you are, radiating both tenderness and truth, softness and fire. You don't need him to save you. You want him to join you. But he does not yet know how. He fears you'll see the mess inside him and pull away, that your gaze will turn sharp when you realize he is not always wise, not always confident, not always composed. He fears that love, real love, requires a surrender of all the shields he's built. And maybe you would welcome that surrender. Maybe you've spent nights imagining the moment he drops the armor, steps fully into himself, and finally meets you eye to eye, soul to soul. But here is the most painful truth. He must choose to do that work. You cannot do it for him. And you must not wait for him to begin. Because a woman who has walked through her own shadow, who has unlearned the belief that her love must be earned through sacrifice, no longer waits to be validated. She no longer ties her worth to a man's readiness. She no longer sees herself through the lens of his confusion. She sees herself clearly, and in that clarity, she no longer fights to be understood. She no longer explains herself to a man unwilling to listen. She no longer softens her power to make room for his fear. She simply stands, rooted, whole. And if he cannot meet her there, she blesses the lesson and continues walking. Because her love is not a lifeboat for a drowning ego. It is a lighthouse for a man who has learned how to swim. And when that man arrives, if he arrives, he will not need to be rescued. He will not be afraid of your depth. He will not fear your fire. He will see your strength and not feel diminished by it. He will meet you not with the trembling of a boy, but with the steady gaze of a man who has already met himself. This is the paradox. What men fear most about the women they love is not their anger, or their expectations, or even their independence. What they fear most is that they will be seen too clearly, that the woman will look into the depths they've worked so hard to hide, and stay. Because if you stay after seeing him, then he must stay too. He must stop running, stop hiding, stop performing, and that, more than anything, threatens the world he built to keep love at a safe distance. But for the woman who has awakened, his fear is no longer her burden. She recognizes it, she honors it, and she releases it, because she knows that holding space for a man's truth does not mean holding herself back. She knows that real love does not require sacrifice of self, but a deepening into the self. And she will not trade that sacred knowing for the crumbs of attention or the illusion of potential. So if he walks away, she does not chase. If he retreats, she does not follow. If he fears her truth, she does not quiet it, because she no longer confuses his fear with her failure. She becomes a woman who holds her center. A woman who loves without losing herself. A woman whose worth is no longer up for negotiation. And from that place, that fierce, sacred place, she rises beyond reach of anything that would ask her to shrink. And so she rises, not with vengeance, not with sorrow, but with the quiet power of a woman who has remembered herself. She no longer hopes for him to see her. She sees herself now with piercing clarity, and in doing so, she becomes the very thing he feared and longed for all at once. A woman who cannot be possessed. A woman who cannot be seduced by anything less than truth. A woman whose love is not given as a bribe for affection, but as a reflection of her sovereignty. There is something unshakable in her now. She has walked through the ache of being misunderstood. She has stood in the emptiness where his presence once was. She has survived the illusion of being too much and come out radiant on the other side. And in that survival, something has crystallized. The understanding that the kind of man who cannot meet her depth is not her loss. Because she knows what it costs to stay where she must shrink. What it means to silence her knowing just to keep the peace. What it feels like to carry the weight of emotional labor for two. And she will not go back. Not because she is hardened, but because she is clear. The clarity of a woman who has done her shadow work is a force few men are prepared to face. She does not speak from wounds. She speaks from wisdom. She does not perform femininity to be loved. She embodies it. She no longer fears her own intensity because she has stopped mistaking it for a flaw. And now, if a man stands in front of her, trembling with the weight of his unspoken fears, she does not flinch. But neither does she bend. She does not take his retreat personally. She does not chase his silence. She watches not with judgment but with discernment. She knows that fear is part of the path, that the ego must die before the soul can emerge. But she also knows that it is not her task to pull him through that fire. He must walk it himself. He must choose to face what he spent a lifetime avoiding. And if he doesn't, then she lets him go gently, powerfully, finally. For she no longer waits at the threshold of a man's becoming. She becomes herself. And in doing so, she becomes a mirror only the brave can look into. The man who sees her now sees himself. Not the self he shows the world, but the self that waits behind the masks. She calls him out, not with force, but with presence. She awakens the king within the wounded boy, but only he can crown himself. If he does, if he chooses to walk through the pain, to sit in his shame without escape, to tear down his own illusions brick by brick, then something sacred can begin. Then she does not become his reward. She becomes his reflection. The partner, not the prize. The equal, not the caretaker. And together they build not from fantasy, but from truth. A union not forged in dependency, but in resonance. But until then, she will not lower herself into the ruins of his unhealed self. She will not throw ropes to a man who won't climb. She will not teach him how to love her while abandoning the love she has for herself. Because she knows, a man cannot truly love a woman until he stops fearing what she reveals. And when a man finally stops running, not just from her but from himself, when he lays down the weapons of performance and steps forward without armor, then she will meet him. Not because she needs him, but because she sees him. Not for what he was, but for who he's become. And in that moment, their love is no longer driven by hunger. It becomes a dance of presence, a sacred, sovereign devotion, where each meets the other in wholeness, not to be completed, but to be mirrored in truth. She does not demand this love. She does not beg for it. She becomes it. And that is the most dangerous thing of all to a man who is not ready. Because a woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses.